Sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. We have a lot of guests tonight. Thanks to all of you for coming. So I'm just going to read off our extensive list. Glenn Powers, thanks for coming. Eric Hilkeast, Rajat Deep Bakshi, Jason Bursill, Jordan Giberson, Shannon Fowler, Shane Labrash, Elonia Aguilar, Adrian Massage, Jeff Gainsford, Chad Benoit, Joe Frazier, Victor Deveau, Mitchell Dubé, and Ben Oliver, our RVC visiting. So I think someone else is going to do it quite better. Thanks for coming, Ben.
Jason.
John Palmer, Matthew Haynes, and I apologize for this one, Serdin Boskovic. And that's our list of guests for the evening. I just want to say a quick word about some upcoming training offered by ASHRAE. We do these HVAC boot camps. There's a training coming up in May. I think it's 18th to the 21st for that week. If any of you want more details on it, please contact me. You can also look on the ASHRAE website. But this is HVAC Essentials 1 and 2. I've talked to numerous people who have gone to these courses, and they are really great. You come out of this course having a great understanding of HVAC systems, different types of systems, psychrometrics, load calculations, that kind of thing. It covers a lot of stuff you don't get in school, and I think a lot of people with mid to kind of beginners would really benefit from that course. So the course is in Toronto, and I know one of the gentlemen giving the course is about 40 plus years experience. The other fellow, Joel, used to be a member of our chapter, is also going to be teaching part of that course. So again, if you would like any information, there's info on the website. You can contact a member of the executive. Thanks.
Thanks, Chris. Next, I'll ask Dan to come up and say a few words about the ASHRAE winter meeting that's just finished taking place in Vegas and make a special announcement as well.
Thank you, Abby. This year's winter meeting in Vegas proved to be a truly fantastic event. ASHRAE saw record attendance with nearly 3,600 attendees representing 58 countries. Now, for those of you who haven't been to one of these meetings, I would highly recommend it. Never in my life have I seen such an organized variety that is just at your taking. Like these seminars, you will find it hard to find enough time to fit everything in that you want to do. It's fantastic. There were two important announcements that directly affect Canadians that came out of the ASHRAE winter meeting. The first one from Region 11. Now, for those of you who don't understand or maybe don't know how the regions work, there's ASHRAE Society, there's many regions underneath Society, and then there are many chapters underneath those regions. We fall into Region 2. There are many other chapters in Region 2. Region 11 is the other Canadian region and is basically Manitoba West, Region 2, Ontario East. So the first important announcement affecting Canadians is from Region 11. Tim McGinn won the nomination for DAL, Director at Large. The second important announcement comes directly from Region 2. In fact, it comes from our very chapter. This person is tremendously dedicated to ASHRAE, and at the winter meeting successfully won the nomination of Society Treasurer. Now what this means is that this person will enter this June into a one-year term of Society Treasurer, followed by a one-year term of President-elect, and then ASHRAE Society President. Would you please join me in congratulating Mr. Daryl Boyce, our 2017-2018 ASHRAE Society. Daryl, would you take a
Well, it is an absolute honor to have been selected to be the next Treasurer of Society. And as a grassroots organization, it really starts at the chapters, and I know that this chapter was a big part of having me put forward for this position and being successful in being accepted for the next Treasurer. And I will do my best to represent the region and Canada, and of course ASHRAE internationally. Thank you very much for your support, and we'll have an interesting time of it. Just to note, when I become president, I'll be the 6th Canadian to be president of ASHRAE in the 60 years history of ASHRAE, the combined societies that formed ASHRAE. So I'll be number 6. There's been 1 from Vancouver, 2 from Edmonton, I did some history, 2 from the Toronto area, and now 1 from Ottawa. Thank you very much.
Congratulations, Daryl. That's fantastic. So just prior to the meeting, we had a tech session presented by Rod Lansfield on controls. It was really well attended. Our tech sessions seem to be very popular with about 20 people attending each month. So make sure to check what's upcoming. And if you have any questions, speak with Rod. I'm sure he's happy to share his presentation and his knowledge. So tonight's theme for the meeting is CTTC. So I'll ask Jeff Watson to come up and speak on that.
Thank you, Abby. So I am the CTTC chair for the Ottawa chapter, and basically CTTC stands for the Chapter Technology Transfer Committee, and my role here is essentially the transfer of information relevant to our industry in the HVAC and our field from society down to the chapter level. This can be accomplished through any kind of bulletins that come from society. I try to transfer that in our bulletin or communicate to our membership here in Ottawa. Some of the activities and programs that fall under my umbrella of responsibilities is the administration of the Distinguished Lecturer Program. This is basically where we have access to a wide range of topics and professional lecturers that will come here and speak about a certain topic. There's many qualified individuals for this, and we've been fortunate this ASHRAE year to have 3. We're going to have 3 distinguished lecturers visit us. 1 has already happened, and we still have 2 to come. So that's pretty great. Another activity is the annual ASHRAE webcast, which happens every year in April. It's a free webcast. This year it's on April 20th, and it's the topic of take control using analytics to drive building performance. And we'll have some more information transferred to you guys about that. The other option, I guess the other activity that falls under my umbrella is the chapter program. However, we're fortunate here in Ottawa to have a dedicated program chair. And it really is, the chapter program is so crucial in ASHRAE, as it is what we deliver to you guys that either keeps you coming back every month, keeps you to join, or encourages you to join ASHRAE or maintain that membership. And it is critical to the success of ASHRAE as our members are the lifeblood of our society. So at this time I just want to take the opportunity to thank Jacob and the rest of the BOG who have worked tirelessly to put this year's program together. And the final activity that's been touched on last month in my absence was the ASHRAE Technology Awards. It's just a program to recognize achievements by our members who have applied innovative building design in areas of comfort, indoor air quality, and energy efficiency. And I just want to remind you that our deadline here at the chapter level is March 15th for any submissions, and I just want to encourage you. We're going to be reaching out hopefully to find some projects here in the Ottawa-Valley chapter that can be submitted. It starts at the chapter level and works its way up through to the regional level and then up to society, so I think it would be great to have some representation from our chapter at that. I think that's basically everything I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. So I see that we have two tabletops this evening, one from Hydro Ottawa and one from Master Group, I believe. So if a representative from each of those wants to come up and have a quick chat about what they brought this evening. Takers?
Hi, I'm Trevor Freeman from Hydro Ottawa. I'm going to be speaking tonight later, so I'm not going to take up too much of your time, but there's a number of people here from Hydro Ottawa. We all represent the Conservation and Demand Management Group, so we provide incentives for reduction in electricity consumption and demand. That's part of what my talk is tonight, so I don't want to spoil all the exciting stuff from here. But certainly grab any of us, a bunch of us are sitting at the table over here, and chat with us throughout the evening about any of our programs. The key thing to remember is we have money to help people save electricity, and we're looking to give it away.
Anyone from Master Group?
Hello everyone, my name is Ahmed. I'm from Master Group here in Ottawa. One of the companies that we represent here is Renew Air. They are the only one of the manufacturers that has 0% cross-contamination energy course. It's actually the only manufacturer out there that's ASHRE certified for the ERVs. So if you can want to have a talk about that later, and the 10 minutes or so. The talk for the tabletops. No, it's okay. Okay, I just like if you guys want to have a talk with us, it's we're completely welcome you to talk about the ERVs. We have Nicholas, Anthony, and myself, and Chris Fudge as well. If you have any questions, just let me know. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have a lot of student activity things going on over the course of the next month, so I'll ask Adrian to come up and speak about the career fair first.
So we do have a career fair coming up. It is March 2nd. It'll be at the Carleton University Fen Lounge. We've got all students coming up from Carleton, Algonquin, La Cité, Cégep, and Ottawa U. We've got at least 15 We've got at least 15 booths from employers, and it's going to be a great event. If you're still interested, registration is still open until Friday, and it's online, the OVC website. Thanks.
And Peter is actively working to come up with a student activity job site tour. So Peter, did you want to come and say a few things about that?
Hi everybody. So we have it's a job site tour that's going to prequel the career fair. It's going to take place at Carleton University. It's going to be a new health science building. It's a 7-story building. Jeff Watson would know a little bit about it, likewise with Benjamin over here. It'll be led by Guillaume Baudet. When I first talked to him about it, he was just adamantly supportive of the idea. He really liked the idea about getting students out to the job site. I said, hey Guillaume, can we do this over lunch real quick, 1-hour tour? And he said, Peter, no, we're going to do it right. So it's 2 1-hour tours, so it'll be back to back. It'll be 2 groups of 10 students. To have a man of his position to support this really is, it's telling of the Ottawa-Valley chapter in general, just that kind of support for students. So it's really good stuff to have. Of course, Dan Redmond was instrumental in the planning as well, and Rob Lasser certainly supported. Really good stuff. It's going to be a great tour. The way it's going to work is I'm just going to give 20 spots divided up to the student chapter presidents, and then they'll decide which students go. So none of you can harass me for that. But Jason Brissell is right over there, so he's the man to talk to. Elizabeth Primo as well, she'll have a couple spots. Ben Oliver and I met with her last week and then had some very productive conversations after, just talking about how to expand the student chapter in general. I feel like I'm rambling on about this too much now, but it's going to be awesome. And of course that career fair after the fact. We have a lot of booths left. Price is very reasonable. Definitely sign up. Thanks so much.
So tonight, as Chris mentioned, we have a visiting RBC. The RBC of Student Activities, Ben Albers here. So Ben, you want to come and say a few words about student activities and RBC?
I'll be a little more brief than Peter over there. I'm actually wearing this name tag tonight because I don't mind. So yeah, I wanted to introduce myself. The student activities chairs you guys have are amazing, and they've gotten to know me over the last couple of years. But so my name is Ben Oliver, and I just wanted to again introduce myself and tell you guys about some of the stuff that we're doing, which we do a lot of stuff with the design competition, which I think you guys have two chapters that do the design competition. Grants, which you guys are also involved in. It's almost, if you do a good application, a good way to get $5,000 US for any undergraduate equipment projects. A lot of them turn out to be capstones. And then we do stuff for K-12 activities, which is starting to grow a lot more. And then everything post-high school. So our student program, which will be upcoming in Chicago. So if you guys have any questions, you can either ask either of your two student chairs or come up and talk to me or send me an email. Thanks.
Thanks, Ben. So the last two orders of business before we get dinner is Adam Graham to come and talk about the upcoming seminar and RB.
Hello, everyone. First off, I'm going to talk about our upcoming seminar. And I'm going to be looking at my phone. I'm not texting. I'm just going to read off a portion of the first one here. So it's Wednesday, March 22nd. It's going to be following our evening program meeting. And it's actually our first seminar of that morning is going to be the program speaker from that evening prior. So he's going to be talking about CSA B52. And he's going to go into details on that. And basically going through chiller plants, split systems, and variable refrigerant flow systems, and talking about some of the changes to that standard. The second seminar is going to kind of take some parts of that, but it's more going to be focused on VRF or VRV. And the idea there is it's going to do kind of a 45-minute to 1 hour overview of the technology and design. And then the second part of it will be some advanced modules, so on heat recovery systems, designing for low ambient, and controls and integration, which is sometimes a challenge for those systems. So I hope you guys all can make it out, and cost is on the website. It's $175 for a half day for an OVC member, $225 for non-member, or the full day. We're offering a discount for $300 for an ASHRAE member, or $375 for non. So hope to see you all out there, and get online and register. Spots are filling up. So next I'll move over here and I'll just open up a quick RP update. And I didn't want to pull it up too soon because we've got a very exciting, if I can figure out this color scheme, we've got a very exciting new donor on the list. So I wanted to take this opportunity to just say thank you very much to Hydro Ottawa. We just received a $5,000 check from Hydro. It's a fitting time. It comes right before this program meeting, which they've been instrumental in setting up. So we're definitely thrilled with all the donors we've had so far. We're at about 54% of our objective this year. So I'm sure some of you have heard, have gotten some phone calls asking about donations, but if you haven't, we'll be calling you shortly again. And anything that's donated, it does make a big difference for ASHRAE. And not only for ASHRAE, but it comes back to us through the chapter level, through standards, through great technical resources. So thanks again to everyone who donated. I won't take too much more time. I'll just have this list in the background, and I'll be coming around. I know I haven't gotten to everyone, but I've got tickets for the March 2nd game, if you're wondering what to do after the career fair. March 2nd, 2 tickets in the 200 level with a parking pass, and I'm raffling them off. It's $20 for 5 tickets, for 10 for 2 tickets. So
Were they donated?
they were donated by Walmart. So thank you very much to Walmart.
All right, so I think that's everything before dinner. So as soon as we get the word, we can start, and we'll reconvene after dinner.
So today I want to talk a little bit about what that means and why you should consider getting involved as well. Starting at the very beginning, what is ASHRAE? And I'm sure we're all quite familiar with this. This actually I borrowed from their website. It's the mission statement and the vision for ASHRAE. What I want to focus in particular on tonight is the last line and how ASHRAE actually achieves our goals of furthering the well-being of humanity and our built environment. You'll see these 4 words, research standards, writing, and education, come up a couple of times throughout the presentation. So we're going to dive down into the nuts and bolts of that a little bit. ASHRAE really works in 2 different ways. First way is what we're familiar with here, the local chapter meeting, or what we call our locally. These type of events are where we exchange technical expertise, we receive news from society level, take part in some fundraising activities, and do our education seminars to educate on a local level the members within a given region. But what is ASHRAE Society, and how do we get involved in that? ASHRAE Society is kind of the next level up, and they act on a global opportunity, not just in a local area. And again, here they have kind of 4 or 5 main tasks that ASHRAE does. Developing standards and guidelines for engineers and the HVAC industry at large to use. Conducting research to further our knowledge of human well-being and the built environment. Providing the education to the HVAC community at large. And supporting government advocacy. One of the key components here, though, is that you've heard the word a few times tonight already. ASHRAE is a grassroots organization, which means very much that it is driven entirely by volunteers. So we're always looking for volunteers. If we grab an org chart off of ASHRAE, we'll see at the very top of everything is ASHRAE membership, which again is comprised of everybody, and people donate their time into different components. A little hard to see for people in the back, I apologize, but there's a couple areas. In green, you see the CTCC side, the technology transfer guys. We heard a little bit about that today. We see the chapter regional. What I'm going to focus on, though, is in the area under the blue here, which is under the Technology Council. And the Technology Council is where ASHRAE really does a lot of the work, and this is where a lot of the publications and documents that you're familiar with get developed. In particular, we're going to talk about technical committees. ASHRAE has really 4 different special types of committees that focus on technical information. The first and foremost, and the one that I'll spend most of the time on tonight, is what's called a Technical Committee, or TC. ASHRAE knows their acronyms, so we'll see a few of those tonight as well. This is most common type. We address a wide range of topics. We'll cover some of the different areas that ASHRAE addresses in a moment here. But this is the primary committee type that you'll find is supporting the bulk of the ASHRAE effort. There's also task groups and technical resource groups. These groups address a single task or have knowledge in a specific area that can support an area of, can support a certain concern ASHRAE has. And then finally we have a multidisciplinary task group. And these groups are formed to tackle really specialized problems that involve expertise in more than one area and sometimes outside of HVAC. So who actually makes up a TC? Who is ASHRAE Society? Well, it's actually people all around us, and I'm sure, do we have anybody here that serves on any technical committees? 1, 2, 3. Yeah, the members of these committees are entirely volunteer, and they come from within society. That means that these people are manufacturers, consultants, researchers, academics, utilities, regulators, government, anybody with an interest in the built environment. When you join the technical committee, or one of the other types, there's really 3 types of ways you can participate. First and foremost is as a voting member. And any given committee can have between 6 and 18 of these type of members. You become a voting member primarily by attending, participating, and ultimately being nominated to have a voting position. There's also non-voting positions, which are typically called corresponding members. These people contribute time, resources, expertise, authorship, opinions, but they don't necessarily have a vote in the final say. Typically, corresponding members will eventually become a voting member just by attending. And recently, ASHRAE introduced a new type of membership, which we'll talk a little bit more about how that works. But it's called provisional corresponding membership. And provisional corresponding membership basically means that you get to be a part of things right away, and you'll continue to be a member of that committee, providing that you actually contribute or show up once in a while. So how TCs actually work. All of the technical committees report to a upper level group called TAC. That's where we have a section head. Within a TC, you're always going to find a chair, typically a vice chair, and a secretary. These are really the kind of leadership within a given technical committee. And then underneath that, we have our membership, the voting members, the corresponding members, and the provisional members. Each technical committee has to assign somebody to be a webmaster. We all have websites, which are a great resource if you're curious about anything that's going on, in particular with some of the standards development. We have liaisons, which work with other committees and with ASHRAE Society, and sometimes even within local chapter groups to disseminate information. And we have informal liaisons, which do something similar but a little less formal. Each technical committee also has a group of subcommittees that work with them. And the subcommittees are typically where the work is going to get done. There's a subcommittee that writes the handbook. Every technical committee is responsible for a handbook chapter. Subcommittees on research, on the programs and seminars, standards, and then sometimes subcommittees have other types of subcommittees as well as needed. TCs are divided into several sections, and a section is responsible for a certain area. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm part of section 511. Section 5 here is our ventilation and air distribution. Part 11 of that is humidity control. We also have a very sister committee that we work with very closely, TC 57, which is evaporative cooling, adding moisture to the air and humidity go hand in hand. But there's also areas, sections that focus on just fundamentals and psychrometrics, indoor environmental quality, materials, refrigeration, a very broad range of expertise that encompasses the entire built environment. TCs have several main tasks. The first is conducting research. And so within our groups, we work to identify where there's holes in the research and how we can fill that. Typically what we'll do is we'll identify a gap in knowledge, and then we'll propose a project with the research committees within ASHRAE. They'll evaluate our proposals and ultimately decide whether or not that will be granted. Once it's granted, we'll be assigned a budget, and then the technical committee will actually go out, look for universities and academics to bid the project, and then monitor and run the project while it goes through the research. When the project is all completed, it's the TC's job to then disseminate that to ASHRAE Society. And you can see an example of a project we just wrapped up this year, actually, research project 1630. And our goal was to update the scientific evidence associated with low limit relative humidity. Some of you may have noticed that ASHRAE 55 and 62 have either relaxed or removed low limit humidity requirements. And we were looking for really a justification for that and realized that there wasn't a whole lot of research that had been done in recent years to support that. And so our project went and took a look at that, looking at some of the recent research and ultimately coming up with a recommendation that the Sterling chart, as published in '86, was fairly accurate with some modifications. We're also responsible for standards. Standards can cover a wide range of topics. I mentioned 55 and 62 are some that you're probably very familiar with. But these are typically handled by subcommittees that report to the main technical committee, or an SPC. Every technical committee has several SPCs underneath them that do the actual work. Technical committees, our job is to identify areas where we need standards, recommend those to ASHRAE, get them approved through the formal approval process, and then work on developing them. We're also responsible for writing the handbook. Typically, a technical committee will be assigned several chapters of the handbook, consistent with where their expertise and their knowledge is. And those are on a four-year publication cycle. So we have a couple of years to put together new content and update existing content according to the latest research and what's happened in the industry. Finally, technical committees are also responsible for providing all of the seminars and programs that go on within an ASHRAE conference. Typically, you're going to have committee members suggesting ideas for new seminars or new education. We'll propose those to the ASHRAE leadership, and if they find that it fits with the goals for that given conference, we'll typically be approved and then get to put together our speakers and our content. If you've never been to a technical committee meeting, it would look something like this. You'll notice a table in the middle. That's typically where we're going to find our voting members, and that's where a lot of the main discussion will happen. This one, Technical Committee 1.4, Controls Theory and Applications. They will do a little bit of work on some of the backnet things and some of the other controls applications we see. So it's a very well-attended committee. Ours, TC 511 is a little bit smaller. We tend to have about 20 people show up at ours, whereas they tend to get about 100. But the format's relatively similar. You'll have the main committee, and then any guests and corresponding members will fill up the gallery. So when do technical committees actually meet? We meet twice per year in person at the ASHRAE conferences and have additional calls throughout the year as our work schedule requires. We just wrapped up the 2017 ASHRAE Winter Conference, which we talked about a little bit earlier. Our next conference is going to be in Long Beach, held in June. And then the following year, we'll be back in Chicago for 2018. So a little bit about my technical committee. We've talked about some of the different things that technical committees are responsible for. My committee, 511, we're responsible for 3 different standards. The 164 series of standards, which provide a method of test for humidifier equipment. What this essentially means is that when engineers spec humidification equipment, if they've been tested according to the 164 series, you can expect that the output and the performance rating of those is consistent from manufacturer to manufacturer. And that's important to allow a lot of industry to move on and have a predictable method of selecting equipment. Research, I talked about RP 1630 that we just completed last year. We're working on building on that and looking at doing some more direct research in the coming years. In particular, investigating some of the areas where humidity and occupant health interact, potentially looking at a study in a retirement home or a long-term care home. Programs, we also do some work in that regard. With the completion of RP 1630, we wanted to make everybody aware of the work that we've done as well as educate people in the state of the art in that regard. We put on a very successful seminar in Las Vegas. We were a little bit worried actually. It was kind of funny. We got assigned seminar slot 1, which was 8 a.m. sharp on Sunday morning in Las Vegas. So we figured we might get 10, maybe 20 people out. We actually had over 200 people show up and completely fill the room and completely exceeded our expectations. So yeah, apparently not. Very successful. We're also working on a seminar for Chicago in conjunction with the 5-7 committee, the evaporative cooling guys as well. Handbook Systems and Equipment, Chapter 22, that just wrapped up. If you have a look at your latest 2016 version, Chapter 22 had quite significant revisions actually. We added a lot of content. So if you're working on any humidifier projects, be sure to check that out and take a look at some of the new things we've added. Our next publication is 2020, but we're always looking for feedback or ideas from industry as to what we could actually do to make that better. So how do you actually get involved and how do you become part of a technical committee? ASHRAE recently made this very, very easy. They added a link on the website, ashrae.org/join-a-TC. There's a very simple 3-4 line web form. You simply fill in your ASHRAE number, your name, and what committee you're interested in being a part of, and you automatically become a provisional corresponding member. That means that you'll be copied on the dealings of that committee. You'll get to find out what's going on with the inner workings, hear a bit about some of their standards and some of the things that are coming up. And if any of that interests you, you would simply show up or participate in some of the calls that they're having, and that would eventually get rid of the provisional status, move you up to corresponding member, and put you in prime position to become a voting member and a full member of that committee. One of the best things you can do is actually come to a conference, meet the other people in the TC. All opinions are welcome, and there's absolutely no charge to attend a technical committee meeting. For the ASHRAE conferences, you'll typically see a registration fee on the website. You only need to pay the registration fee to attend seminars and technical tours and some of the other things. Absolutely anybody can attend a technical committee meeting, so don't let the registration fee put you off. If you've never been to a conference before, a great way to get started is actually the winter conference. And I'd recommend, if you've never been, try Chicago in 2018. One of the big advantages of the winter conference is that they're held in conjunction with the AHR Expo. So not only do you get an ASHRAE conference with all of the seminars, the education, an opportunity to go to a technical committee meeting, do some of the social events, you also get the trade show, and that's a great opportunity to see all the manufacturers, see the new products, and see what's coming out. So if there's one thing to take away, if you've never considered joining an ASHRAE committee, they're very fulfilling, very rewarding, look great on a resume, and I certainly encourage you to have a look if that interests you at all. Any questions? Okay. Oh, sorry.
I was curious, how did you get started? What kind of caught your interest?
I had a pretty good mentor within our organization who had been doing ASHRAE technical committees for many years, and decided he was going to retire one day, and said, "Oh, you got to come out to one of these and just check it out." And I've stuck with it ever since. So it turned out to be a fantastic opportunity. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks, Nick. Adam, are you ready for the raffle?
All right.
That was great.
Winning ticket 392-1860. We raised $510, so thank you Walmart for donating the tickets, and congratulations Steve.
Thanks, Adam. Just give a little introduction about our program this evening. Our speakers tonight are Trevor Freeman and Martin Singh. So as a program officer in the Conservation and Demand Management Group, Trevor is an ambassador for Hydro Ottawa's Save on Energy incentive programs. He's committed to helping building owners, managers, and industry partners fund creative solutions to reducing the environmental impact of buildings due to energy consumption. Prior to joining Ottawa Hydro as a sustainability and energy consultant, Trevor was a project manager for several high-profile retro-commissioning projects throughout Ottawa, and managed both LEED and BOMA certifications throughout the city. Trevor's a professional engineer, has LEED designation, and is a member of BOMA's Ottawa Environment and Energy Committee. As the Director of Sustainability and Energy for WSP, the National Capital Region, Martin Singh leads a team of industry professionals in the delivery of sustainability, project certification and benchmarking, energy modeling, energy auditing, retro-commissioning, and commissioning services. Martin has a background in architecture and more than 2 decades of experience in facilities management, project management, and consulting. For the past 9 years, Martin has dedicated his time and efforts to promoting sustainability and energy efficiency and helping clients to green their projects. Even a high-end sports car needs to be driven properly and requires periodic maintenance. Retro-commissioning is a tool to help operators get high-end results out of their buildings. This includes meeting efficiency and energy conservation goals, maximizing tenant comfort while minimizing complaints and unforeseen issues. During tonight's presentation, Hydro Ottawa and Martin will explain what retro-commissioning is, outline why building owners and managers are interested in it, and provide examples of findings from previous retro-commissioning projects. So with that, Trevor and Martin.
So really, how this works tonight is I'm actually just giving a bit of an introduction. It's going to be a long, extended introduction, but I'm going to do my hardest not to out-charm or outshine Martin, because he's really going to give you the meat of the presentation. What I'm here to do...
Go ahead, outshine.
What I'm going to do is give you a little bit of a primer as to what is retro-commissioning, why a building owner would want to do retro-commissioning, and then why is Hydro Ottawa even up here talking about retro-commissioning in the first place, which will be the latter half of my presentation. So just a quick little bit about me. I've been working with Hydro Ottawa now in the Conservation Demand Management Group. Like I said at the beginning, our goal in the Conservation Demand Management Group is to help facilitate building owners and managers to reduce their energy consumption or offset their demand and provide incentive to do that. So we're out there finding projects that are interesting and great to work on and will reduce electricity consumption. And trying to get involved in those and helping fund those projects to overcome some of that capital at the beginning. My background is in sustainability consulting. I spent 6 years in the consulting industry doing energy consulting and sustainability consulting before ending up at Hydro, where I've been the last little while. So another really quick bit on Hydro. We're going to talk mostly about our audit funding program tonight when I do get to the Hydro piece, but Hydro Ottawa does have a number of different programs to help projects move forward, including retrofit projects. If you're at all interested, again, come talk to us or cdm.hydroottawa.com, give them a little plug, check out our website. That's where you can find all the information, at the very least find out how to get in touch with us, and we'll be happy to chat. So like I said, today we're going to talk about what is building retro-commissioning, why you would want to do that, and how Hydro Ottawa fits into that. And really the fourth bullet point is just introduce Martin, or set Martin up to talk about some of the more, some project specifics. So what is building retro-commissioning? The standard definition is a systemic process to improve an existing building's performance. So like anything in the world today, technology in buildings is moving at a pretty alarming rate. It's constantly changing, constantly evolving, which is great. And a lot of those changes help building operators understand the buildings more, have better control over the buildings, really know what's going on. But building operators, like anybody else, have only a limited amount of time in the day and a limited amount of brain space, and building operators change jobs just like they always have. And so what tends to happen is that they don't have the time to take a step back and look at their building, really understand the big picture, and small problems snowball into bigger problems and bigger problems that never get dealt with. Systems get turned from automatic to manual and stay like that for years on end, and ultimately the building isn't operating the way it's supposed to be operating. Retro-commissioning is a process to right that ship, and get things back on the right track, and really get everybody back moving in the right direction. Ultimately, it's a tune-up for an existing building. Just like the little intro said, a sports car can be the greatest car in the world. If it's not driven properly or if it's not maintained, you're not going to get the performance out of it that you want. So we should start by talking a little bit about some terminology, because terminology gets thrown around quite a bit and different terms are used interchangeable. Building commissioning, recommissioning, retro-commissioning, and ongoing commissioning. So starting with the root word of all that commissioning, it comes from the shipbuilding industry where a ship would be built and would float on the water and may be able to move forward and backwards, but is not really seaworthy. Before it's considered seaworthy, it has to go through the commissioning process, which is a pretty rigorous series of tests and trials, testing out all the systems, finding all the problems, all the kinks, addressing those problems, and getting everything working the way it's supposed to be. In addition, training the crew so that they know how to use all that equipment, all the systems, and know how to operate the ship properly. The same logic can be applied to buildings. So you can build a building, you can put a roof on it, you'll probably get hot water out of the boilers, cold water out of the chillers, you may get some fresh air out of the makeup air units, but that doesn't mean the building is operating the way it's supposed to be. And all too often, buildings are built and then handed over and they're never commissioned, and they never operate the way that the engineer sitting at the table envisioned that they would operate way back before there was ever a shovel in the ground. So building commissioning is ideally what happens when a building is brand new and is the process of going through those trials and tests, figuring out all the problems and addressing them right off the bat. Recommissioning, therefore, would be if that ever has to happen again. So it's already happened once. For whatever reason, there's new systems, there's new space type, the owner changes and guts the whole building. So it goes through a recommissioning. It's as straightforward as that. Retro-commissioning, however, which is what we are going to talk about tonight and what we tend to see more often in the industry, is when a building was never commissioned or has changed so drastically that it has to go through that, what would be an original commissioning process, even though the building may be 5, 10, 20, 50 years old. And so retro-commissioning would look at problems that may have been there right from the design stage that were never addressed, or problems that have developed over time, again, as equipment gets turned from automatic into manual, as problems snowball and the operator is just trying to keep tenants from calling them every day and complaining. So that's what retro-commissioning is. Ongoing commissioning is the process of, after either commissioning or recommissioning or retro-commissioning, maintaining that high level of standard and maintaining that continuous sharp focus on having the building operate according to how it's supposed to be operating and having the systems work together how they're supposed to work together. So how does retro-commissioning differ from an energy audit? This we like to call the energy pie. So if you think about where you can look to save energy in a building, you can look at building systems. So what's the physical equipment that's in the building? How that building is operated, so how you use that equipment, and then what are the tenants doing? How are they using their plug loads or their lights or whatever aspects of the building they interact with? And there's savings to be found in all three of those areas. An energy audit typically looks at the building system. So an energy audit finds a lot of capital intensive projects, change out your chillers, change out your pumps, you're not using the most efficient equipment, you're nearing end of life, et cetera, which is a very useful exercise to go through. Retro-commissioning, on the other hand, looks more at building operations, and in fact, a lot of retro-commissioning projects tend to be a bit of a hybrid of an energy audit and a retro-commissioning exercise where capital-intensive measures will be identified, but more importantly, retro-commissioning looks at how the building is operated, how those systems interact together, and how it's set up in the building. So a great example would be in an energy audit, the energy auditor may go through and say, well, that motor is not the most efficient motor you can have. There's a newer version out there. You should swap out your motor for the more efficient version. Whereas retro-commissioning may say, well, is that actually the right size of motor for what it's being used for? Maybe you can even go with a smaller motor. Or is the motor running when it needs to be running? Maybe it's running flat out 100% of the time, but it doesn't really need to be. And so we can put a speed drive on it. And getting into that detail. Another example would be if an energy owner goes through and identifies, well, that motor has a speed drive on it, so we're good to go, and moves on. The retro-commissioning agent would look at that speed drive and say, well, let's dive into the sequence of operations and understand, is that speed drive operating when it should be, or maybe it's been switched off into manual and it's running 100% of the time, so even though there's a speed drive on it, you're not getting any value out of that. So again, it's digging into the sequence of operations, looking at how equipment is being operated versus just what equipment is there and is it the most appropriate equipment. The last piece of retro-commissioning tends to be what's called functional testing. So functional testing looks at, you may have equipment in your building and you look at how the equipment's being operated, but is it doing what you're telling it to do? And so if you have a set point on, a night setback on your floor, everybody leaves at 6 o'clock and you want the temperature to drop and the lights to sweep off and all your VAV boxes to close, is that actually happening? Or are there broken sensors or uncalibrated sensors, and are things not happening out on the 16th floor even though you are asking them to do that at the BAS? So retro-commissioning gets into actually going through a testing process to make sure that the building is doing what you're asking it to do at the BAS level. So looking at, again, that holistic approach of energy audit looks at systems, retro-commissioning looks at systems and operation, and then there are tenant energy audits that look at that. It's really a more holistic approach to looking at building operation. So why would a building owner or manager want to go through this process and do retro-commissioning? Hopefully this is obvious for you, but I'll go through a few points. At the very root of it, it improves system performance. Spending that time and looking at the system and putting in the effort and energy to make sure it's doing what it's supposed to be doing will improve the system performance. That leads to the following bullet points: saving energy. If you're operating the system the way you're supposed to be operating it, or the way the building needs it to be operated, you're going to save energy. You're not going to be running things when you don't need to be running them. It's going to improve comfort. Your tenants will be, hopefully, tenants will be happier. That means more lease renewals. The building or the system is running as it's supposed to be running. A reduction in maintenance, so this is both streamlining and improving planned maintenance, having a better plan of when to go out and maintain all your various pieces of equipment because you have a better handle on them, as well as reducing unplanned maintenance, which for a building owner or manager is kind of the worst case scenario. Retro-commissioning is a fantastic opportunity for building operations teams. So going through these projects, it is very much a partnership between the retro-commissioning agent, the consultant, and the building operations team. They sit down together, they spend a lot of time going through each system, sequence of operations, looking at how things are intended to be running, and this is usually some of the best training that building operators can get when they are with a highly skilled retro-commissioning agent. And establishing the last 2 points, establishing a process for performance tracking and persistence and better documentation. So a retro-commissioning report, if done properly, generates a great process for understanding the building, understanding what the sequence of operations should be, codifying that, actually having it written out in a document that everybody understands and knows how to use, and being able to track when change is happening and when the system sequence of operations is deviated from knowing what to do. Should we put that on a temporary change, or should it be a permanent change and change the sequence of operations? And that's all part of the retro-commissioning process. The retro-commissioning agent is not just there to deliver a report and walk away. They are looking for persistent strategies that will be maintained long after they're gone. A few stats for you. Lawrence Berkeley Laboratories down in the States, a few years ago, actually, ASHRAE published an article about their results not that long ago, a couple of years ago. Found after a study of over 600 buildings, over 10,000 identified energy conservation measures, an average of 16% savings with an average payback period of 13 months. If you talk to a building owner, if they could save 16% of their energy with a 13-month payback period, they jump at that chance, not to mention all those other ancillary benefits as well. So to put that to the test, we did a quick look at some stats from Hydro Ottawa's territory. So just 5 retro-commissioning studies in the last 2 years. We found an average of 60% savings with a payback period of about 2.2 years. And we're not talking about the worst dog of the building out there that it's easy to find those savings. One of the buildings on there had an Energy Star score of 90 in the 90s before we even started the retro-commissioning exercise. And so that means they are operating in the top 10th percentile of other buildings in the Energy Star program, and they were still able to achieve in that range of savings with a pretty substantial payback period. So this is a great exercise, regardless of where your building is on that scale of barely making it by to operating really well. Retro-commissioning is still a fantastic exercise to go through. Sorry, I'm going to go back there. This leads into the next piece. You'll notice on the far right, how much of the audit cost was covered. So in all 5 of those cases, there were Hydro Ottawa incentives for that, and a good portion of the audit cost was covered by Hydro Ottawa. So that gets to the piece of why am I up here as Hydro Ottawa talking about retro commissioning. Hydro Ottawa has a mandate from the province to encourage reduction in consumption and demand. We have to do it by the province, but it's also in our best interest to do it. The incentive program is far cheaper than any new generation that we would have to put in place in order to meet rising demand and consumption. So we have a number of different programs that we do that with, retrofit program among other ones, but the audit funding obviously is what we're talking about tonight. And this is an incentive to owners for completing studies such as retro commissioning studies to identify opportunities for savings in their buildings. There's a couple different ways that we can give out that funding. So the audit funding program on the left-hand side is what we'll talk mostly about. There's also what's called existing building commissioning. It's a little bit misleading because at the moment it only focuses on chilled water systems. There is talk, and there has been talk for a little while, about expanding that to be a more holistic building commissioning program. It just hasn't happened yet, and we used to say we were expecting it by the end of 2016, but here we are in February 2017, we haven't seen it yet, so at some point in time that will change. Processes and systems engineering studies, so this is for, excuse me, high demand, high consumption applications such as industrial applications where there's huge demand, huge consumption, and looking at massive savings. So there's not a lot of that in our territory here in Ottawa, but those would be really big systems and big studies. What we're going to talk mostly about is that audit funding program. So there's 2 programs under that, the electricity survey and analysis for owners. That's a whole building study such as a retro commissioning. It has to be a minimum ASHRAE level 2 energy audit, but oftentimes that gets built upon and the scope gets expanded to include a retro commissioning study, and that's where the retro commissioning studies would fall under. Excuse me, the building system audit is more of a deep dive on the specific system, so looking specifically at the chilled water system or the HVAC or whatever it may be. In terms of how much we can fund, so it all depends on the square footage of the building. We have $1 per square foot. That gets capped at 50% of the audit costs, or $25,000 depending on the size of the building for the ESA, and 50% of the project cost, or $5,000 for the building specific, or the building system audit. So again, usually we get around that 50% of the project cost. And that goes directly to the building owner, so it offsets the cost for the How to participate. So I always tell people, get in touch with us as soon as possible. Once you start working on a project, it gets a little bit harder for us to get involved. So as soon as the wheels are turning and it's about to happen, we need to be aware, and we go through a few steps to establish eligibility to make sure that an audit will qualify for the funding programs that we have, or in case of retrofit, a retrofit project will qualify. There's a pre-approval process, so we want to go through and make sure that everything's in order, and we pre-approve an incentive amount. Say, as long as your scope stays what you said it was, this is what your incentive is going to be. The work is done by the consultant or whoever, and all the post-project documentation is submitted to us. In the case of audits, we review the audit, we make sure that it meets the minimum requirements that are laid out, and there's a very clear checklist that has to be met by the auditor. The building has to commit to implementing any no and low cost measures. So that's anything with a 1-year payback period or $1,000. Sure.
What pieces of information do you need specifically? Like if you're a designer and you're approaching you guys about this
For the energy audit?
Yeah.
So for an energy audit, it has to meet, it's basically ASHRAE level 2. That's the bulk of it. There are a few other, I don't want to call them formatting things, but we want to see master list of findings. We want to see all the ECMs laid out with single payback period, what the incentive is, etc. That's for the audit. There's a more involved list for retrofit projects, which I'm happy to chat about in fact. But yeah, for audits, it's meeting, there's a checklist.
And this checklist is online?
It's online, or if you tap me after, I'll email it to you tomorrow morning. Yeah. It's also on that cdm.hydroottawa.com website. So yeah, we do a review, we make sure that checklist is met, and again, the owner has to commit to no and low cost measures. But that's, like I said, 1 year of simple payback and under $1,000 of capital expense, so that's usually not an issue. And then once everything's approved, we'll be inside.
I guess I have a question on the existing building conditioning. It says chilled water.
Yeah.
What type of chilled water study is that done? Like would it be an overall study of like the entire system, or kind of campus?
So that incentive program is kind of broken into different pieces. There's an investigation period, so there's a allotment of money for putting meters on, understanding what's happening. There's an allotment of money for creating a report, so for a commissioning agent to take all that data, turn it into a report. Then there's money for implementation, and there's money for follow-up studying. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head various scopes. We kind of treat every project different. I think a campus would apply depending on how the account is set up. A lot of our incentive programs are tied back to how is the hydro account set up. We need to tie, the check that we give out has to be tied to a Hydro Ottawa account. In some cases, we can lump things together if it makes sense. If it's one owner that has a bunch of different accounts on campus, for example, we can kind of lump that together, but every project is a little bit different.
Some that would be like, let's say you had a bunch of old United valves, you replace them with valves,
it could be if it was identified in the audit, but that may also be covered under the retrofit program. So a lot of implementation we end up lumping under the retrofit program because the retrofit program is pretty broad. That's our biggest program that generates most of our business. And really any, in quotation marks, any, because there's a few exceptions, but most projects that will reduce energy consumption, electricity, obviously specifically for us, would likely qualify for a retrofit incentive. And I've been saying energy a lot, and I do want to highlight that Luigi Pisani is in the room from Enbridge. Enbridge also has a lot of incentive programs, and so if you are interested in that holistic energy savings, then chat with Luigi, who's sitting in the shadows there at the back. Yeah.
Is it focused just to mechanical and electrical systems, or do you go to building leak heat and other issues?
Yeah, so a good retro commissioning report would kind of look at all of that. If there's building envelope issues, I mean, a retro commissioning agent is typically not going to be a specialist in building envelope. They may identify some pretty obvious problems and recommend further study. For the most part, it's building systems and the operation of those systems. Same thing with energy audit. I'm going to push forward here. I don't want to steal Martin's thunder. Oh, there we go. That's good. So with more questions, I'm happy to do more questions after the fact, but I do want to make sure that Martin gets up. Martin's going to talk about some specific examples that WSP has been involved in, a couple specific projects, and the findings that they were able to see, and the process I think that they went through.
So thanks, Trevor, for that first intro into what retro commissioning is. And thank you for inviting us, or inviting me to be able to come up and talk about some of our projects. So Trevor covered a lot of information in his presentation. He actually will allow me to skip over a couple of my slides. As the introduction said, for those that aren't familiar with me, I am Director of Sustainability and Energy for WSP, the Ottawa National Capital Region. If we look across Canada, WSP's got about 120 people that are dedicated to sustainability and energy in our network. In the Ottawa region, we have probably 18 people who are dedicated to doing sustainability energy management. That includes doing sustainability consulting, green building certifications like LEED, BOGO-BEST, those types of things, but it also includes energy modeling, energy auditing, retro commissioning, commissioning services. So a lot of the work that we do does tie into our topic of tonight, and a bit of statistics about what we've accomplished in the past years. So Trevor touched on this about what is retro commissioning, and he also talked a little bit about how to retro commission. I'll stay on this for a little bit. So retro commissioning is a systematic approach to being able to look at the operation of an existing building and try and identify where there are opportunities to improve on the operation of that building. For those who are familiar with new building commissioning, retro commissioning process is quite similar. You're going to be doing similar exercises. You're basically looking for the same approach or concepts, but you're applying it to an existing building that would have undergone or lived through a variety of different changes over the period of time. Trevor talked on some of those elements, but often what happens in a building is that buildings will undergo change while they're through their lifetime. They could be physical changes where the layout of the actual floors get changed throughout the course, or it could be upgrades and change to certain systems as certain systems reach end of life. Variety of different things like that. And there's also the whole operation sequence as buildings get handed over from one operation person to another operation person. Each individual operator all have, based on their knowledge and their experience, different ways of being able to run their buildings. So, and through that, be it good or bad, sometimes you will have things that get introduced into the operation of a building that can be beneficial to the system, and other times you can get something that gets introduced that's not so beneficial to the system. So retro commissioning is a process where you try to go in and look at all the factors that have influenced the change in the building and find opportunities to commission the building to now operate under the new requirements at that time, the period of that building. The how of retro commissioning is essentially broken out into 4 different phases. And in a lot of cases, retro commissioning exercises or mandates that will get us consultants for doing retro commissioning exercises may only touch a couple of these phases. If you're lucky, you're going to get a project where you're going to be going through all of the 4 phases with your client, but that's not necessarily always the case. So the first part is planning. It's figuring out that, it's talking with your client, figuring out that a retro commissioning exercise would be valuable on their building. And it's sitting down with them and figuring out, okay, what exactly are we going to be looking at when we're doing the retro commissioning exercise? Are there things that are particular? Do we look at Hydro Ottawa incentive programs to try and help cover some of the costs of these? Is it beneficial to be doing that? What are the time frames for doing all those different types of things? Once we've got the plan in place and we're deciding we want to go to retro commissioning, the next part of a retro commissioning exercise is doing the investigation. So it's actually physically going to site. It is working with the building operators, doing a walkthrough of the building at a first place. Second, looking at the various systems, documenting and collecting information about the systems. In a lot of cases, it can actually be getting whatever plans or drawings or schematics or specs that you may have or about the building and the various changes that may have occurred to the building throughout that period of time. Because we use energy as a language of conversation with our clients to be able to educate them on why the benefits of doing some of these changes can come into play, we will do energy analysis on the building. So we'll collect 2 to 5 years of energy data or energy bills from their buildings, and we'll analyze that information to be able to see what we can gather of it. We'll try, based on as much information as we have on their building, to make a breakdown to try and figure out, okay, this is how much electricity this building is taking, how much of that is going into heating or cooling or other systems of the building, same thing with natural gas. And that's an exercise that if you've ever done energy audits, you're doing that exercise, the same thing in an energy audit. So there is a lot of similarities at the beginning stage between doing energy audits and doing retro commissioning. During the walkthroughs with the operators of the building, a lot of time will be spent going around, walking with them, seeing the various systems, learning from their experience whether there are issues that they are running into with certain systems, certain tweaks that they may have done over the years or over time to be able to figure out how they're getting around some of the issues that are manifesting in their building. A lot of time will actually be spent looking with them at their BAS system, and in certain cases, their BAS contractor may be brought in to be part of that discussion, because not all building operators know as much about their controls as their controls contractors. So having a controls contractor involved in the discussion is very useful. In looking at that, we're looking at sequence of operations, trying to understand how the building has been programmed to operate, and pulling as much information as we can from that. From all that information, we're gathering, we're analyzing the information, we're identifying as we're listening and going through this opportunities where we see from experience that there may be opportunities to optimize the system. Certain times when we're looking at the sequence of operations, some of the stuff will jump out at us and say, like, that really doesn't make sense, why are we doing it this way? You may look at set points for various pieces of equipment and notice while you're looking at the set point, that set point seems like an odd value, why is that happening? And you're digging, so it's really much sort of a detective or an investigator approach to looking and trying to dig up as much information as you can as to how the building is currently being used and operated. And part of that discussion will also talk about having discussions with some of the building occupants or with a management team who can tell you what the occupancy use of the building is. So you want to know what the schedule of the building is. When do they start it up in the morning? How long is it being operated? Do the operational hours line up with the actual usage of the building? Those are all sorts of things that have a tendency to fall in or to trend into buildings and end up affecting its potential to be running at its best case. Okay. In the process of doing the investigation and identifying the potential opportunities for making improvements to the building, we'll write up a report that will outline what those improvements are. We'll look at how much energy can be saved from it, what that translates into dollars. We'll do simple payback analysis. We'll look at incentives available for retrofit programs, and we'll put all that into a report to the client so that they can look at and see where are the areas in their building that are not operating as best as they could, and what is the potential for them to improve that, and what are the energy benefits of doing that. And like I said, a lot of the language turns around the energy benefit, because for building owners and managers, that's really what ultimately their clients are looking for, is how do I make a better return on my investment. So if they see opportunities to better run their building that's going to save them money, they really want to be looking at that. So the conversation of the dollar sign of the exercise is a big part of the discussion. But one thing to retain is that retrocommissioning is not just solely about energy savings and dollar savings. There can be other reasons why you want to be doing retrocommissioning exercises. And an element of that is occupant comfort. So you may have a building that is having operational issues where the operators or the occupants of the building are lodging large amounts of complaints about the operation of the building, and the building operators are going to be looking and making adjustments and hunting down those things and tweaking them. But as soon as somebody gets a call for temperature being too warm in one part of the area, the building operator of that building is going to go investigate, yeah, it is too warm. What am I looking at? Then they're going to start looking at their BAS and trying to identify what may be the problem, and somewhere along the way they may be identifying, well, it's a defective sensor in this area, or this pump isn't running, or I need to. So they will make changes to the operation of the building, either replacing equipment, but in a lot of cases it's just tweaks of set points within the BAS system that are trying to alleviate that complaint and that problem that they're having in the building. And once that problem gets alleviated, they're basically, okay, that complaint's closed, I can go on to the next one. And this just goes on and on and on. And in the process of doing that, one of the aspects that they're not realizing is they're slowly tuning out their building and compounding the problems that they're doing. So aside from the aspect of wanting to optimize the energy efficiency of a building, looking at potentially trying to optimize the comfort and the operation of the building can be another very valid reason why you want to be looking at a retrocommissioning exercise. Fortunately, in the process of doing that, you are going to find energy savings, and your clients are going to love you for that aspect. But in certain cases, we've had clients where their prime focus on getting us to come in and do a retrocommissioning exercise for them has been they've been experiencing occupant comfort issues for an extended period of time, and all the tweaking and playing around that they've been doing has not been taking care of that problem. Okay. Once you've done the investigation and you've identified where the opportunities to save or optimize the building are, then you get into the implementation phase. And so this could be a great aspect for those who are on the design side of stuff. This kind of shows where if you're involved in the retro commissioning exercise at the beginning and you're identifying opportunities to improve a client's operation and efficiency of their building, and some of those measures include physical changes to their systems, well, as a design perspective, that's more scope that you can be getting out of the project. So keep in mind that retro commissioning is a good lead-in for potential future implementation work. Okay. In the process of implementation, you're basically taking the ideas and the savings that you've identified in your project. You're doing the engineering required to do them. In some cases, it can be very minimal engineering. In other cases, it can be very detailed engineering that's required. But you're implementing or you're developing that engineering in the plan to make those replacements. You're working with your client, in certain cases, and contractors to implement those changes. And once those implementation changes are made and the upgrades are made, then you're getting into a phase of the process called the handoff, whereas you're basically bringing that building or handing back that change back to the client and their team. And in that process, a key aspect of that is in handing off to a new changes to a building and the new clients, like under standard commissioning process, you want to be making sure that the building operators are getting training on the new way of operation for the building. Making these changes and implementing these changes and not making sure that the people who are going to be continuing to run the building understand the changes that have been made and are trained on doing that can be very detrimental, because they will, if they don't understand how they should now be running their building, likely revert to old habits of how they've been running their building in the past. And those habits in many cases is what got them into a poorly or less efficiently running building. Okay? So, any questions on that aspect before I move on? Yep.
Do you get into the jumbo devices at all for the reconditioning, like making sure you lock something on the also
No, I would say in general cases we're not getting down to that level of detail. The only reason we would get down to that level of detail is if we've identified that there's an operational aspect that's not operating properly, and we're being asked to hunt or try and figure out that. So on a mandate where we're being asked to look more at the operational side and the thermal comfort side of things, if they have a very specific issue and they're asking us to help them identify and resolve that issue, then yes, we may do detailed verifications like that. But in general terms, in a retro commissioning exercise, we're not going to that level of granularity.
Sometimes building operators will ask a problem by changing set points that
Yeah. So, and it can be an issue. We would probably try and look for higher level indications that would lead us down that path. So we would look at opportunities where you may see more energy consumption associated to heating or cooling certain spaces, and potentially see whether there is something that leads to that indication. And if we didn't get that, then we might tend to explore further. But we're typically trying to, those types of operational issues won't necessarily lead to significant energy imbalances, so it's very hard to pinpoint that kind of issue in the type of analysis we're doing. So, yep.
I've done a retro commissioning project where we went in not expecting it, but we found that about 15% of the VAV boxes throughout the 9-story building had failed. And we ran, and it was generating client complaints. But you just said that it doesn't really impact the overall energy consumption of that building. But if you've got major issues like that, you're getting more client complaints. There's a hell of a savings in operational costs, just so the operators aren't chasing the tails.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, and that percentage of failure of the units will manifest itself in other aspects where, in looking at the operations and the energy consumption, that would have, in a building like that, we would have caught on to that kind of poor energy performance, and we would have gone and investigated more into trying to find that out. So there's a difference between a building that's got 15% of its terminal units that aren't operating properly versus the occasional unit here or there in a building. That's a little bit more complicated. We've got a building, we've got a project where we very recently did a retro commissioning exercise, and for a client, it's a building up in Montreal. They've had systematic issues with the operations and a lot of complaints from their tenants for years. I don't know why they waited so long to actually call us to come and have a look at this, but we talked about the retro commissioning exercise. We presented it to them. We presented both options to them. One was, we're simply going to go in and do the investigation and identify your thermal comfort problems, resolve those, help you to resolve those. And the second part was, while we're at it, since the age of the building and the amount of changes that you've had in the building, it would make sense to do a more detailed retro commissioning exercise looking at the energy optimization and optimization of the building. And for their operational needs at this point, they decided to only go with thermal comfort aspects. So we've gone in, we've done that, we've identified a bunch of things in the process of doing that, and it actually allows us to then go back to them and say, we know why internally it has something to do with the fact that the management team has two different departments that run. One department is responsible for the operations, another one is responsible for the long-term planning. So we have to be talking to two different groups actually to get them to give us the full retro commissioning mandate. So the first group was okay to say, yeah, we want you to look at technical operational aspects. The other group was saying, we're not ready to make that investment in our property, we'll get back to you. So that's sort of where we're at with that situation, but that was one of our ends to that project. So now what I want to do is talk about a couple of projects that we've done in the Ottawa area and give you a bit of background on why we were asked to do a retro commissioning exercise on these buildings and sort of the big highlights of what we were able to accomplish on these projects. I'll mention right away, all of the projects that we're going to be talking about were incentivized by Hydro Ottawa under the audit funding programs. And I can elaborate a little bit on those as we're going along. So the first building I want to talk about is 275 Slater. This is an office building complex here in Ottawa. As you can see from the picture, it's not a young building. It's been around for a number of years. Can't remember off the top of my head exactly how old the building is. And we were brought in to this mandate in helping the property managers and the owners pursue a recertification of their building. So 275 Slater is actually the first building in Ottawa that was ever certified under LEED for existing buildings, and it was done back in 2009. And back in 2009, what's interesting about this project is that building actually went through a retro commissioning exercise at that time, because one element of what you can do in a LEED certification is to do a retro commissioning exercise. So this building underwent LEED E-bomb back in 2009. We were brought in 2 years ago to help them recertify their building, because for those who may not be familiar, a LEED E-bomb certification has to be renewed every 5 years. So as part of their renewal, we had to do another retro commissioning exercise on this building. And what was interesting is that over that 5-year period from the first retro commissioning exercise that we did for the first certification to this retro commissioning exercise, the building went through a couple of different building operators. And they actually went from, and this off the top of my memory, my notes unfortunately are in the notes section of the slide, so, but at the time of certification back in 2009 for the first certification, this building, I believe, had achieved a Energy Star score in the low 80s, which was a good score for a building in that period of time. And over the 5-year period since their first certification to the time we were asked to come in on the second certification, the building operators, like I said, changed hands a couple of times. There wasn't a good amount of overlap in training, and their Energy Star score went from the mid-80s down to 53. And fortunately, near the end of their 5-year cycle, the building operator that came in was a lot more interested in energy efficiency and had noticed that their building wasn't performing as well, and he started doing things on his own to try and rectify what had been sort of undone in the past few years. And on his own, he was able to bring his Energy Star score back up to about 73. In the process of doing our retro commissioning exercise for them, we were able to identify 9% energy reduction through our savings with a 4-year simple payback. So even though the building had already undergone retro-commissioning once in the last 5 years, and you had a building operator that had done significant improvements on his own to bring back their energy performance from a 53 Energy Star score to 73, there were still opportunities to be able to make some changes in that concept. So through that process, we were able to identify another 9% of opportunities for them through the exercise. That 9% was actually split out into O&M measures, which are basically low-cost, no-cost measures. Those are the ones that Trevor referred to in the incentive program, where he said that if you're using an audit incentive, the owner is required to implement those no-cost, low-cost measures. So those measures identified for this building represented an additional 5% energy savings, and we're able to have a payback of less than 1 year. The other 4% of the energy savings had a longer payback of about 5 years, but 5 years is still not a long payback when we're talking about energy improvements to a building. And those, that 4% required more capital investment in certain systems to be able to upgrade those changes. And some of those investments weren't necessarily huge investments. We're not talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. In certain cases, we were talking about $10,000, $15,000 to be able to make some of those changes. Okay. Some of the key findings that we found in doing our retro-commissioning exercise on this building was an opportunity to refine a specialty-free cooling loop that they had in the building. So this was a fairly interesting aspect to this building. Over the years of the building being operated, and as technology advanced, the tenants in the building started needing server rooms and data centers in the building. And the building, over the life of the building, the operator and the designers that were involved in that process, instead of putting in a dedicated system to be able to handle that load, figured we have an opportunity through our air handling units to circulate fresh air through the unit during unoccupied hours, and running that through a coil in the system that's tied into a loop inside the building that's feeding these rooms. And so we're going to take advantage of that as our means of being able to cool. So they created this opportunity in the air intake of the air handling units to put a coil, allow that cold air to go past the coil, and use the coil that was in the system as a heat rejection from the rooms inside the building. Bit of an ingenious way to go about it. The downside to it was that over the years of operation, they didn't realize that ahead of this specialty coil that they had put to be able to allow heat to escape through the airstream, there was a preheat coil in that air handling unit. So the cool air that they were bringing in from the outside that they were hoping to use to be able to cool down the coil and do heat rejection was getting preheated by the preheat coil and then moved on to the next coil. So that nice cold air that was coming outside was coming in, getting heated up a little bit, and then when it would go over the coil, it would go over at a much lower delta T. So the actual benefit that they were getting of being able to reject heat was being impacted by the preheat coil. So it was an odd but interesting thing to discover about the operation of this building. And although we couldn't, obviously, one of the recommendations that we made to them, which was a long-term recommendation, is you should look at making an independent system for this. But in the meantime, if this is the strategy you're using, you have an opportunity to make it more efficient by dropping the temperature on the preheat coils and not preheating your air as much, so that your coil for this specialty loop could actually reject more heat to the system. So, and that actually did, in looking at it, bring about an energy savings for the building. So it was one way of being able to look at and work with what they had in the building to be able to affect energy savings. Another aspect tied into this cooling loop and also tied into the AHU set point adjustments was that all aspect, but there was also unoccupied spaces in the building that had odd temperature set points in there. Another thing that had happened in this building over the years is that as the usage of the building had changed and new tenants had moved in and moved out, there were certain floors where boardrooms were installed into the spaces, and the systems that were feeding the floor weren't able to handle the load in those boardrooms. So the designers in the course of doing that put in air handling units or fan coils to add additional cooling to those large occupancy spaces, and not exactly sure why, but probably out of wanting to make some savings and not necessarily tying everything back into the BAS and operating these properly. One thing that we discovered is a lot of these boardrooms had their fan coil units would operate 24/7. So they hadn't been programmed for an unoccupied mode, and they also hadn't been programmed to have a schedule or something on them when the building was occupied, but they weren't being used. So in that, we were able to identify opportunities to, first of all, get those tied in, put them on a schedule so that when the building went unoccupied, they wouldn't run. But then we also recommended that they put in motion sensors into those spaces so that when the boardrooms weren't actually being used during daytime hours, they were shutting down and saving energy. So those ideas that we had identified weren't necessarily big ticket items. They were very simple things that needed to be able to change, but they were still things that were affecting the performance of this building. The next building that I'd like to talk about is the Sir Wilfrid Laurier building, or it's 340 Laurier. Again, on this project, our retro commissioning mandate came about because the clients or the owners of the building and the managers were wanting to pursue LEED certification. So as part of that process, we did a retro commissioning exercise on their building to help them improve their energy efficiency. In this particular case, it was a needed requirement because the building wasn't meeting the minimum Energy Star score required for LEED certification. So to be able to help them achieve their objective of LEED certification, this building is predominantly, the tenant is federal government, so for the client to be able to maintain their lease, they needed to be able to demonstrate a green certification on their building. It was a key component of looking at this. So we went in to do a retro commissioning exercise on this building, and were able to identify a significant amount of savings in this building. So in this building, we were able to identify 29% energy reductions through our analysis. A number of those were low-cost, no-cost measures that amounted for about 5% of the reduction and had a simple payback of 3 months. And the rest of it were tied to more capital-intensive requirements for retrofits that amounted to 23% of the savings. Simple payback on those is 6 years, which is still a really, really good return on their investment. So definitely things that were for their value. This project, a lot of the systems in the building were end of life. In particular, the chiller plant was one of the elements that was in there. And so that was one of the retrofit measures that was put forward to the project. But just so you know, before everybody jumps to the conclusion, I know it's easy to get to 23%. They did a chiller replacement. The chiller plant replacement only represented about 11% of that 23%. So there were opportunities in other aspects of the building that were that allowed us to go get even more energy efficiency savings than simply doing a chiller replacement in this project. Key findings on this project. So this is a good example of a building where over the years the building operators, through lack of understanding of the building or lack of experience or lack of knowledge, did some operational changes and tweaks to the building that had very negative impacts to the operations in this building. So one of the big things that was done is the operator in this building for a large period of time had complaints from the tenants of being too hot or too cold, and in the process of trying to resolve this, made some significant changes that created more problems, and in the process of doing that, actually significantly increased the energy consumption of the building. And one of those elements was that they had perimeter induction units and that were designed originally to be able to handle heating in the wintertime and cooling in the summertime, and not properly understanding how that worked, they made valve changes and shut things off to make it so that those induction units were running in cooling only mode all year round. And so in the wintertime, when they had to heat the space, their air handling units and their makeup air units that would feed the perimeter would have to bring in significant amount more air, and they would have to heat that air, and then that air would get cooled by the induction units, and so they had constantly heating and cooling simultaneously going on in their building. So that was a big element of the changes that were brought about in this facility to be able to improve their energy efficiency. So part of our recommendations was to change all that to make sure that there was no chilled water running to those induction units during the wintertime, and reinstate the hot water going back to those units so that they could operate properly in the wintertime, and make sure that there wasn't any opportunity or any situations where there would be simultaneous heating and cooling going on in the building. Okay. Other aspects of this were the energy efficiency touched on, the economizer refinement. So they had a building with makeup air units that would bring in outdoor air, and they were trying to optimize using the outdoor air to do economizer-free cooling. But what they didn't realize in looking at the operation of the building is that their air handling units, their dampers were locked in one position. They couldn't modulate. So as a result, although the control system was trying to economize, it really actually couldn't economize because it didn't have control of the dampers on the system at that point in time. Scheduling of fans was another issue. This building had exhaust fans for the washrooms in the building, and for some reason their exhaust fans were running 24/7 even though the building wasn't operating on a 24/7 basis. So there were huge periods of time where their exhaust fans were running for no reason, consuming energy, but more than likely those exhaust fans were also causing imbalances in the building and losses of efficiency in the building. And set point adjustment throughout the building was another aspect. So there were, when you ended up looking at the details of what was happening in the building, it wasn't surprising that for a long period of time they were getting constant occupant complaints in the building, because the operator who was running that building just was constantly tweaking and playing, trying to just resolve the problem and not being able to understand how the entire building was able to was meant to be operated and resolving those issues. Okay. Now, I mentioned that in this project we did a chiller, or the client had already intended to do a chiller replacement or a chiller upgrade because of the end of life of chiller. In the process of doing the exercise, we, as part of our retro-commissioning exercise, we looked at that chiller plant replacement, and we identified, or we were able to identify multiple recommendations to them. So instead of simply, originally before we got involved, they were intending to do a simple straight match for match replacement of their chiller. They knew they needed to replace the chiller plant, they knew how big it was, they had basically talked to some manufacturers and representatives and got some pricing on what's it going to cost me to replace my 800-ton chiller plant with an 800-ton chiller plant, and they had budgeted for that, and that's where they were sort of heading. But in the process of getting involved with them, we said, hang on, before you go that far, we want to look at and make some analysis to look at whether you should be doing a same for same, or if for some reason you have overcapacity in doing this. So we actually did that exercise and were able to identify that they did have too much capacity. Their plant was sized for about 800 tons, when in reality for their building, they probably only needed about 500 tons. So we were able to do two things. In the recommendations, we were able to recommend that they install a smaller plant, but not only were we able to do that, we were able to make recommendations for them to invest some of the money that they had already budgeted into buying better chillers. And in the process of buying better, more efficient chillers, they were going to save more money in the long run. The great thing about this story is not only by reducing, reevaluating, and making sure we have the right size of plant for their operation, to help them to reduce the size of the plant and allow them to buy better equipment. In the process of doing all that, we still managed to save them money. So the budgeted amount they had for replacing their chiller plant, we saved them money on that, and they were able to take that money and reinvest it in the other recommendations that we were making for the building. So of the 14 capital cost investment recommendations that we made to them, because of all this, they were able to afford 10 of those 14 without any additional investment beyond what they had already budgeted for the project. So great success story in that context for both them and for us.
Ottawa is contributing a big percentage.
Yes. Yeah, so on that project, not only did we get incentive to do the energy audit aspect of the analysis, but the client is also getting retrofit incentive to help them with the chiller replacement, but also other of the measures that we're implementing on that project. TD Place. So this is the last project I want to talk about. This is a project we're really happy or proud to have been involved in. So for TD Place, the mandate was actually a combination of retro commissioning and energy auditing. And as Trevor had mentioned, energy auditing and retro commissioning really go hand in hand on a lot of these mandates. The two other projects at the beginning included energy auditing and retro commissioning in the exercise as well. In this particular case, simply based on the client's budget for being able to do work in the current year, we came up with a strategy where we did a retro commissioning exercise on the south side of the stadium and an energy audit on the north side of the stadium. Now, if people were paying attention to what I just said, some people should or may have caught on to, well, hang on a second, you said you just did a retro commissioning exercise on the south side of TD Place. Isn't the south side of TD Place brand new?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. The south side of TD Place has only been in operation for about 1.5 years, 2 years at most right now. And we did a retro commissioning exercise on that side of the building, and we actually found significant savings. Okay. So this goes to say that commissioning of a building is very important, and if a new building doesn't get properly commissioned at the outset of its commissioning, then looking at retro commissioning a building is not that far-fetched of an idea. In this particular case, the owners and operators of the building were looking at this building saying, you know what, it is costing us a heck of a lot of money to run this facility, and they themselves had identified a bunch of things that they thought were odd about the operation of the south side and said, you know what, we need somebody to come in and help us to identify what we should be doing about that, and that's where we did the retro commissioning exercise. Wrong way, sorry. So for TD Place, we had the, and sorry, I know I'm talking along here. How much time do I have left, guys, or am I keeping people long? We're good? Okay, I'll try to wrap this one up. So the percent energy reduction that we've identified in doing the retro commissioning and the energy audit of the north, so retro commissioning of the south side and energy audit on the north side is 12%. 12% may not seem like a large percentage, but when we're looking at a stadium like TD that uses 3.8 million kilowatt hours a year of energy, that's a lot of energy that we're managing to identify in the process of doing this. 8% of those measures identified were low-cost, no-cost measures, so operation and maintenance measures. 4% of them are capital retrofit measures. The other interesting thing to point out on this is that the north side, where we did the energy audit and not the retro commissioning exercise at this point, the reason why we did energy audit on that side is that building is, a lot of the equipment in that building dates back to 1967 when the building was first designed. A lot of those equipment and the systems are end of life. And so in the process of evaluating what we wanted to help the client with, it made more sense to do the retro commissioning exercise on the south side where we knew we had operational issues that needed to be addressed, and on this side to do an energy audit because a lot of the systems on that side were end of life and were going to need to be replaced anyways. So identifying where the most critical issues of energy savings were in their systems was the most value for money at that time for them. We've definitely recommended, and the client has bought into the fact that once we do a number of the retrofit work on the north side, we will be doing a retro commissioning exercise on the north side, even after having done a lot of retrofit work, because there's still opportunity for significant savings in the operations of this facility. Key findings in this project. Well, one of the interesting things is TD Place is a facility that's not used on a regular basis. There is some staff that work in the building on a day-to-day basis year-round, but as a facility, they are very much an event-based facility. So the stadium and the field runs when the Red Blacks and the Fury have their season, and when they're out of their season, it fundamentally shuts down, or should. And then the 67s arena is operating when the 67s are having their season. And then the two sides, or the stadium and the arena, will host a variety of shows and conferences or conventions and stuff like that. But basically, if there's not an event going on, there's not a lot going on in that building. You'll have You'll have on the south side, you'll have the Red Blacks team that have their locker rooms, and when the players are around, there's some activity going on in there, and they have their offices. But if their season's over, they're not around, that side's not running. The media booths that are in that place aren't running, the concessions aren't running in that space, or they shouldn't be running. And that was the interesting thing going into this is, because the building at the time, the designer designed the building to be an events area, but the designers at the time didn't know what the schedules were going to be for the space. And in the process of doing it, they assumed that somewhere along the time, the people who own the building are going to tell whoever's controlling the building, here's our event schedule and this is what we're going to be doing. And as a lot of that stuff was happening through the process of delivering the building near the end, it might have been fair to say that that should have probably been addressed sometime during the commissioning process for this building, but not pointing the blame or looking at anybody, but basically saying in the sequence of events for this building, that didn't happen. And so what ended up happening is when the season would end, the media centers and the concession centers and all the sections of the building in TD South that weren't occupied still had systems running in them all year round. So there was a huge amount of energy that was being wasted in that aspect. They were fortunate to have thought of closing down some spaces, but there were background systems that weren't that fed those spaces that were still running in the background because nobody had looked at scheduling. So that was a great opportunity to be able to help them identify ways to do so. One of the recommendations was putting on not just an event schedule, but also an unoccupied period schedule where the building systems would shut down when the spaces weren't being used. Again, another space where set point adjustments were a problem throughout the building. They had spaces like janitor rooms and server rooms and storage rooms that had thermostats in them that in the wintertime would heat the space to 23 degrees and in the summertime would cool the space to 21. There's nobody in these spaces, like why are you doing that? So those were some of the things that were happening. There were also spaces that were being used on the north side being an older building. It has a BAS, but the BAS was installed over time. Not all the systems were connected to it. So they had a lot of air handling units for the offices, for the staff on that side, the ticket counters and stuff like that, where the systems, because they weren't tied into the BAS, they had a wall thermostat. The people would set it for whatever temperature they wanted, and they'd do their regular day, and at the end of the day, they'd leave and go home, but those systems would keep running throughout the night and through into the next day. So there are a lot of their systems that were just running for extended periods of time when they didn't need to be doing that kind of stuff. Okay. The interesting thing as well is that on the south side, we ended up finding a number of systems that had that parts or elements of the system had not been connected. So we found air handling units that had outdoor air dampers that weren't tied into the unit. So the outdoor air dampers would stay open all the time. We found other places where there were motion sensors that were intended to be operating a unit that weren't connected to the space. We had situations where the exhaust from a boiler system was exhausting in an area that was affecting another system and was causing a problem in the context of that. So a lot of little issues like that were causing sensor operation issues throughout the building. And again here, this alludes back to what I was saying earlier, where the certain areas of the stadium were being left operating in the wintertime. So for example, they had water loops that would pump domestic hot water throughout the stadium and to the media areas and the media booths and the special booths and the washrooms in the stadium. But when the stadiums were shut down for their winter season, those pumps were still running. So there was water circulating through that whole space that didn't really need to be moving around. So a variety of little things like that. Now, yep.
Question though, if you're shutting down a domestic water loop and you've got your ventilation systems and the heating systems also basically at low temperature, what's the risk of freezing of the water loop?
Well, yeah, so there is that aspect that needs to be looked at in the recommendations of doing this. So the recommendations will include, in the process of shutting down certain areas, that there may be a maintenance requirement to drain certain systems to be able to avoid freezing of pipes or aspects of that type. But in the context of the stadium, when the Red Black season ends in November, if they're lucky, if they make it all the way to the Grey Cup, they don't start back up until the early spring. So to keep a lot of those spaces heated simply to avoid those pipes from freezing doesn't really make a lot of sense. It makes more sense to be shutting down those areas, draining them out, letting them go through the winter, and then starting them back up in the springtime.
I was going to say, you don't turn off domestic water systems over such a long period of time unless you're, without taking into some consideration, bacterial contamination, growth of organics, and things like that. So it sounds like this is a big operational training issue between the commissioning guy, training the operator, and then the management of the whole facility, just from top.
Yeah, that is a very good point. That is one of the aspects that through this exercise for this particular facility was an issue. Again, I don't want to, our role in coming in and doing the exercise we were doing was not to second guess or to question or pass judgment on what others may have done before that. It was to look at what the opportunities were, bring that to their attention. And certainly the elements that you guys are bringing up are very valid elements that need to be evaluated in the strategies that are being considered for doing this.
So as part of this, did you end up preparing a training plan for your client?
So right now we are at the point in this project where we've just recently finished the analysis and report portion, and we've had a preliminary meeting with the team and the client to talk about implementation. On the low-cost, no-cost measure aspects, a lot of those things, at the time that we were discovering and working with them, their operators were there, we were talking about them, they were actually proactive and went ahead and implemented immediately some of the recommendations on the low-cost, no-cost side. On the more capital side, or elements like this that would have more of an operational impact, these still need to be discussed with the client to determine which aspects of the recommendations they're going to be going ahead with.
Okay, but as part of this, will you guys end up writing a narrative dealing with operations and actually assisting them in a training package that will allow them to operate over a longer period of time?
Yes, that is the hope of what we're trying to achieve. So the next step for us on this is to work with them to get approval for the implementation of the recommendations, and then through that work with them to implement those, develop whatever training tools and guidance is required for them, make sure that their staff are trained on doing and operating these facilities and looking at the systems that are there. And on the north side, there still remain a number of systems in that aspect because of the age of the systems where, and because of the client's budget at this time, which could only allow a certain amount, we had to identify certain things that were for further studies. So those programs will hopefully get looked at in this year. They'll identify budget to be able to do that, as well as some of the implementation work that's there. It causes, from a hydro Ottawa incentive aspect, it causes a bit of an issue because, as Trevor had mentioned, the audit incentive program, you're eligible for it once per sort of hydro bill. In this particular situation, we can't go back and reapply for the same incentive to be able to continue the work that we're going to be doing. But at the same time, there are other incentives under the program, like the BSA or like the chilled water or the existing building commissioning, system commissioning incentives that could be available under the program. So part of the strategy that we developed in implementing the plan for this project was to say, okay, based on the first incentive that we can get through Hydro Ottawa, what should we be doing in the building? And then what other elements can we go and get additional incentives out of, and we can therefore defer that study on the process. So one of those examples is the ice plant for the 67s rink is something that we were able to defer because we can use either the BSA or the existing system retro commissioning incentive. I'm sorry, I'm butchering the name of that incentive, but there are other incentives that we can then go back and say, okay, we're going to look at the ice plant as a separate exercise, and in the process of that, get money from Hydro to help the client pay for that exercise. Any other questions for either me or Trevor? No? Well, thank you very much. Been great talking to you. Been a great audience. Something that's
just wanted to say thank you, Trevor and Martin, for presentations this evening. You guys want to come give that a small token of appreciation? So just a couple last minute things before we head out. Don't forget about our upcoming events in March, including the seminar, the career fair, the student tour, and the HVAC Essentials course that Chris mentioned in May, and also the CTTC Tech Awards missions. Make sure to check out the communique or the website for details on next month's meeting. I believe we're back at the restaurant, I think. And next month, our DRC Doug Parker will be visiting, so that's pretty exciting. And just a reminder to complete the evaluation forms that you'll receive in the email later tonight, because it helps us for planning future meetings. Thank you, everyone. I hope you have a great night. See you next month.